on a second. That's how bad I am.
No, listen, we got time because it like takes a minute. And then when you see your face looking back at you, if you just click on the three dots, you can do the reshare. You can like copy the link and say, you know what, guys, we're recording, and it will show up. So
okay, so I'm on your profile, but I don't see anything.
It will take a minute. It will take a
minute.
Yeah, it takes, I think it takes like 30, 45 seconds. There's a bit of a delay.
So is it in a special spot there?
It will just show, just refresh it. It should just show.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Oh, we hit. Can you see your face? It's very weird, isn't
it? I see nothing. I don't even think I'm in the right place. Does it matter?
Not really. It's just if you want to let people know you're here.
Okay.
And we're all looking down.
I see it. This one I'm looking for? In a special spot.
Oh, Peter's here already. Hey, Peter. Hello. We're just getting ourselves ready. So you're like, this is like the behind the scenes, but not really behind the scenes. It's like we're here. Hi, Jennifer.
So am I going to see who's on? I want to. Where's Mom? Because Mom always.
Mom's busy working.
So usually your mom's on there.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, there we go. All right, I'm gonna turn my phone off.
Okay, so we don't need to be looking at our phones, do we?
No.
I'm talking live. Hello, everybody.
No, you do not. You do not. It's all good. Oh no, we got people here today. Look, we've got loads of people.
Yeah, we're taking their lunch hour with us.
Well, for us, everyone's like, right, this is like the end of the day, 6 o'clock. What are they going to be talking about?
Okay, yeah, sorry. So I can pretend it's 6 o'clock.
You can pretend it's 6 o'clock, right? So I've muted my phone. Right, Margie, I want you to kick us off and give some set the scene for us, because you know, like part of this is like your show. In that, you were like, right, we're going to talk about feminism, and I was like, oh God, she's going there already. She is going there because we don't talk about it. We're not talking about it enough, are we? We're not talking about it, so we need to.
Well, we talk about it in very narrow conversations, right? So thank you, all of you, for coming here and having this conversation with me. And this is not an exaggeration when I say that I've been wanting this conversation for 25 years.
No, really?
That happened to me when I was a new lieutenant, that we won't go into, but it was somebody, a female in the public eye, and it was somebody I really admired. And then she did something that I realized in that moment was like the anti-feminism type of behavior, right? And that was when I took a step back in my 20s and said, wait, what is this about? Because if we are really not for women and all women, then what is this feminism thing? And so I've just kind of traveled that road of never being in it because I couldn't understand how only some people were in it. And then flash forward, 25 years of trying to have this conversation, and I finally meet my tribe of women that want to have this talk. So, and I really want the conversation to be kind of led by all of you, because I know what it looks like from my side as a white woman. I want to know what it looks like for you growing up and watching feminism, probably your whole life, right? Abby's already shaking her head, like, go ahead.
Abby's like this, right? Let me just like keep myself. I know what she's like. When she gets that look on her face, everyone thinks like Abby's zoning out. She's not. All she's doing is she's like, right, what am I going to start with first? Like, what?
No, believe me. My daughter's in 40 hours a week of behavior therapy. So I have all this background now in watching people's behaviors, and I caught that within 2 seconds. I saw that. It wasn't even a slight eye roll to me. So.
Yeah, it's such a mammoth topic, and it's one that, you know what, Margie, it's funny, we should, I don't know, call it serendipity that I'm on this, because funnily enough, I never saw myself as a feminist, if you know what I mean. I myself, and having a lot of friends who are hardcore feminists, they're like, no, Abby, you are, okay, you don't, you're not sharpening your pitchfork and, doing our marches, but you are, you're talking about equality, and you are trying to level the playing field. And so, I think it's funny. I read an article a few weeks ago about. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but there's been a statue that was unveiled in America with I think, is it Sojourner Truth and Mary Elizabeth, or Elizabeth Cady Stanton. And there were these bronze statues that were unveiled, and a lot of people, this was on Twitter, were like, she was not, okay, yes, she was an abolitionist, and yes, she was trying to free the slaves, but she was not pro-black, pro-black lives or pro-equality with black women. She was not a feminist, not in that respect. And I thought, oh, drinking my tea and on Twitter, thinking, what is going on here? And then I started obviously I knew this session was coming up. And then I just started to break down actually how much white feminists have erased black voices, voices of black women and people of color in this movement. And that got me thinking about this session, and it got me really getting annoyed. Actually, I started thinking, oh my goodness, I've not stopped. Obviously, we've got not right now, but over the years we've had black people have had so many other troubles and so many other things to think about that I actually, in all honesty, didn't stop to even think about that arm of things, until you sent me a message, Margie, and I just thought, hold on a second, yes, this is something we need to discuss, because white feminism is very real, and how it has erased black voices is also very real. So I want to start off with that.
Yeah, Nicole, what's your? Because I want to come to you before I come with my little 2.5 pence worth.
Well, I'm in the same camp as Abi, where I never perceived myself as a feminist. And I think the reason I didn't perceive myself as a feminist is because I felt that feminists I wasn't a part of that group.
Right.
I wasn't a member of that group. So I had to look outside of that group within myself to figure out how I was going to facilitate change in the diversity and inclusion space from a different perspective, because I wasn't, because I didn't perceive myself as a feminist, but more an advocate or an activist than a feminist at large, because I wasn't really being represented. I'm a data and history freak, so I'm going to just quote a couple of things that I pulled out today to share with everybody that are pretty powerful. So if you go back in history and you look at the suffrage leader, Susan B. Anthony, who was, the queen of the suffrage movement, she infamously said, "I will cut off this right arm of mine before I will ever work or demand the ballot for Negro and not the woman."
Ah, yes. That's yes.
Set the tone for a movement that left women behind. Yes. There's another article in the American Psychological Association that I pulled up that talks about Black women being overlooked in people's conversations about racism and sexism, because we all, as Black women, we face the unique combination of both of these forms of discrimination simultaneously. And a lot of times Black women are associated with Black men or Black, not even as women.
Right.
And so when you think of the feminist movement, you're looking at a movement that doesn't see us, recognize us, support us. There's so many issues that are prevalent that have come to head just in the last 4 or 5 months with everything that's happening that highlight that issue. And I can talk more about that as we go. But this sets the tone for me. And I think that we need to start here at looking at history and how did we get here, and then what are the things that we need to do to start to change the conversation and bring to light some of the issues at large that have kept us, not uninvited to the feminist, table.
Right.
That statue that I was saying that was unveiled was Sojourner Truth, Susan B. Anthony, and that was it. That was the statue. That was the bronze statue. Yes, exactly. Where a lot of people were not very happy. Like these women were not pro the feminist movement for everybody. Yes, exactly.
Right. The suffragette movement, it was really about getting white women the vote. It had nothing to do with all women. It had to do with white women getting the vote, period. And she very articulately quotes that and says that right out of the gate. So that's the beginning of the history of a movement that, you know, has been exclusionary of Black women and women of color, including Indigenous women. So.
Yeah. Right. And I think just the couple of observations for me that I had in kind of just thinking about, like, you know, because like you guys, I was like, one, I never saw myself as a feminist because of all the things that we just talked about. So I've always thought about feminism being for white women by white women. Like it just in my mind. So even if somebody had said, like, because Shereen, you're pro women and I'm pro equality of women.
Absolutely.
Well,
Yep.
but I still never put myself in the camp of a feminist because that's not for me.
Right.
Exactly.
Because my ideology is different. It was never created for somebody who looks like me. So it didn't even cross my mind until like Abi said, when Margie was like, we're going to talk about it, I was like, oh my God, right. So let's talk about this. We're going to talk about this. And so that's and then point two, I was when I was talking to somebody else about the fact that we were doing this, and they were like, oh yeah, but you know the feminism thing, it's like an American thing. And I was like, right. This is not even about history. And so that's the reason why when I did the caption for this, and I talked about gender pay reporting in the UK, I anchored it right in the here and now. So I talked about gender pay reporting that we know is a mandatory process that all organisations with more than 250 employees have to disclose the gender pay gap between men and women, right? So we've got this. We've also had over the last few years the rise of the 30% club, and I know they've got chapters all over the world, including Canada, there's some in the States, where that was all about having the FTSE 100 having at least 30% women on the board. Now, interestingly, when they started and gender pay was all kicking off all at the same time, they were talking about the barriers that women face, getting on the board, getting progression, all the rest of it. But they never acknowledged the challenges that Black women faced, but also they were not interested in lifting up Black women. So, and I can talk about my personal experiences when this was all kind of going around and people were going, oh, you should go and be involved in this like chapter, for want of a better word, or go and speak to these guys about this. And I would go into these rooms and these spaces, and I would be the only Black woman for a start, but also they were not interested in anything that I had to say in terms of the experience of me as a Black woman. It was like, yeah, but we're not talking about Black stuff. Like we're talking about women, Shereen, you know, and you kind of get this whole, you know, you're making it about race and it's not a racist thing. We are talking about all women all together. But back to Abi's point, it was never about all women. You know, so even in modern day, so when people think what we're talking about is again history, and I'm going, no, this is like bang up to September 2020, we're still having this. And what you're now seeing is if you go and look at the website, anybody go and have a look at the 30%, I think it is like the 30% club or something.com, whatever else it is. They have now updated it to include something about diversity and inclusion. They still, in some instances, they have not acknowledged that Black people and people of color were left out of their push for gender parity on the board.
Right.
So, do you know what I mean? So all of these things, again, when you go, well, you want to talk about flying the flag, you're actually flying the flag for white women. Really.
Exactly. Right? Absolutely. White feminism, it marginalizes women of color. You know, it fails to give feminists of color a platform to discuss how racial inequality relates to gender inequality. You know,
yes,
and
Alice's point here, because it's kind of saying the same thing. Look at this, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely, Alice. Yeah, and that's it.
But that's a rare, that's a rare stance, and it's a very unpopular one. So even this conversation is, one where white women are like, well, you can't touch that. Oh. That's hollowed ground, right?
Why are they coming for us? And the same, unfortunately, Margie, the same white women will also say, hang on a minute, I was standing next to you black people in the George Floyd protest march, whatever else. Listen, because you know, right? They were like, so hang on, how dare you say that I or we are not for your movement? Because you know what, I did the black square. You know, I went and read White Fragility. I went and sat in on the work. Well, you know, and it comes up this thing, and you know,
this is really stressing me out. Shereen, I mean, everything you're saying, Shereen, is just like absolutely.
Yeah, Shereen, those are the things that I was like, I might actually be able to touch this, right? Because it's coming back again. So maybe I can actually find some people to touch this. And you and I talked about it in the session I did with you about my hometown, where they all went and marched, right? And hashtag BLM also, you know, hijacking that, taking their selfies, doing whatever they were doing, and they did their march, and they're done because I haven't heard from any of them.
Oh my God, Margie, please.
Oh my God, Margie. Exactly.
They're all quiet.
But what happened after you posted your black square?
Yeah.
This is part of the Karen, the Karen Amy Cooper syndrome, right? Where they believe that they're liberals and they expect their white fragility and their white privilege, and they turn it back on us, and with their tears, and they cry out about, well, they're doing this, they're standing beside you, they're marching, they put their black square on to center the conversation back on them, so that we as black women have to console them instead of them starting to think and understand what the issues are. And that's casebook Karen, there are Karens everywhere. We're surrounded, ladies. We're surrounded, and Amy. And I think that, the huge overriding the essence of white privilege and white fragility has led all of these women in this white feminist movement in making sure to shut us down, shut down our voices, shut down our opportunities, not recognize the differences by naming us. We don't even get named.
Right.
So as Shereen said before, they talk about diversity and inclusion, but if you don't name somebody's race, you're not seeing them.
Right.
If you don't name somebody as a black woman, as an Indigenous woman, as a person of color, you are not naming them. If you're not naming them, you are not seeing them. And so one of the ways to maintain that invisibility is to not even to name it.
I see that's been since 64. That's kind of the trajectory that we went. The colorblind this is why Derek Bell, started writing about this in the 80s of, this is really convenient. Good for you. You can be a liberal. You can be, think you're a feminist. You can think that you're, for civil rights, because you don't actually have to talk about it, because you just say that, right? So that's all you got to say. And I'm colorblind, right? So I don't see color, I don't see race, and done.
I include everybody, right? Everybody, right? Yeah. I include everybody, right?
I think the other thing that I want to say is the unintended consequence of colorblindness, because we're actually still getting it, but they're just not using that. People have moved on from I don't see color into, we have talked about anti-racism and this black issue for long enough. A few months, right? A few months. We're just warming up, right? We're finished, right? But we've done so. It's like we're finished with this now. Don't you just think it's time that we all just kind of saw everybody as, coming together, and then, we just move on? Now, listen, clearly I would not be doing this if I'm not pro bringing everybody together to move everything. Yeah. But one of the things that I always say is that if you are not understanding the individual context, and when I say individual, I mean like the specifics. You can start off broadly, we don't like labels, but let's get into it. Black women, people of color, whether it's, black people who are members of the LGBTQ community, or faith, or any of these intersectionalities, for want of a better word, or crossovers, right? Unless you are making sure that you have an acknowledgement of that difference, which means that lived experience is different, you are still colorblind. You are still not seeing those individuals. And what you're doing is you're trying to make out by centering the voices of Black people, of marginalized Black people, of this group, this group, this group, this group, that is somehow divisive. So you hear this terminology like, I'm just finding all of this conversation really divisive because we're just all human beings on one rock. And I'll go, yes, we bloody are. But guess what? We've been pushed off the rock, allowing us on the rock, right?
You know what?
You want to start using that analogy with me, right?
Shereen is, you know what, Shereen, I'm going to even, yes, all of the above, Shereen. And I don't know if you know Ijeoma Olowo, who wrote So You Want to Talk About Race?
Yes, she's amazing. Yes.
She is. She's phenomenal.
That's like my Bible, that book.
She's phenomenal. She wrote a thought-provoking piece for a magazine or an online platform. And she said, when women of color speak up truthfully about race and feminism, we're either dismissed or told that our complaints are divisive and that we should be focusing on the real enemy. Yeah. And, you know, in other words, we shouldn't talk about how racial inequality and gender inequality intersect. And for example, Nicki Minaj used Twitter as a platform a few years ago to shed light on the lack of representation. I think it was at the VMAs, the Video Music Awards. And Miley Cyrus came out and she said, when the New York Times asked Miley Cyrus, what did you think about what Nicki Minaj said about, you know, Black feminism being erased? Miley Cyrus replied, well, Nicki's not very polite. And I think that speaks volumes in itself, you know, that we're just supposed to just roll over and not have a say in something that very much affects us just as much as somebody else. And I think, you know, and that always stuck with me because I was fuming. I thought, how dare Miley Cyrus, the original culture vulture, how dare she say that when knowing, you know, Nicki Minaj is obviously saying the lack of representation of Black women in those nominations, you know, you're erasing what they've done for music. And feminism isn't made just for white women. It's not made just for you. And that always stuck with me.
I think too that people need to understand the history of racism and how it is embedded into both liberal and conservative, progressive, and to the extreme right ideologies in every aspect of our how we live, in every aspect of society. And so because of that, we need to go back, and our work at WTC is focused on people's behaviors, because people have to go back and individually understand what are the systems? Some of this behavior isn't intentional because the systems are made for white people. You know, the whole society is built around white people. And so they have been taught over 400, 500 years to be the leaders, to be the leading society. And so everything within it is about them. So this perpetuation of invisibility for Black women and women of color is part of the procedures and ideologies of the system that continue to keep all of us back and all of us down. The blessing is that in the latest uprising and protests, we're at a point where we're not turning back. We're tired of being silent. We're tired of saying that I'm not gonna. The consequences have been so great for Black women and Black men and people of color to be able to have the conversations we're having today, to be able to speak up in whatever their environment may be, whether it be work, whether it be community, whether it be, you know, in their homes or in their friend's home. We're at a breaking point now where people are no longer going to accept the fear of consequence. And instead, we're about to share our truth. And so we can't turn back now. And so the discomfort for many to hear our voices speaking very loudly, synonymously with the Me Too movement, if you think about it, when the Me Too movement happened, there was no stopping it at that particular point. You know, everybody, that Me Too movement was exclusionary of Black women as well, because so many white women.
They hijacked the movement. They hijacked it.
They hijacked it, right?
Tarana Burke was the one who made that up. And then next thing you know, is she was silenced, and then
Rose McGowan.
Right, absolutely. But one of the other things that I think that movement didn't address was the fact of white women persecuting Black men. You know,
oh, right. Okay, Nicole. Okay.
And sexism as a way to persecute Black men.
All right, because I didn't even think we would get into this right so early. I thought we would just have to like warm up a little piece.
I'm serious. You know, let's talk about history. Like I said, I'm a history buff, and we need to start to weave a thread of all of these issues, of all of these movements, so people can begin to understand and see all the different areas where the movement and subsequent movements that have been very recent still are exclusionary of us. And there are parallels to the Me Too movement with the anti-Black racism movement and the Black Lives Matter movement, in that the dam has been broken. Right. And so we are going to continue to have these conversations. And as we talked about earlier before we started this discussion, that all of us are going to continue to be unrelenting in making sure that we continue to have these conversations and to fight for the long haul, because it's going to be a very long journey to ensure that we see systemic change. Yeah. But when you go back and look at the history of Emmett Till, for instance, Emmett Till was 14 years old, and a white woman decided that she was going to use him as the catalyst for sexual assault against her, to which he was killed. And she later recanted, you know, many years later, recanted.
Nothing happened to her.
Right. Absolutely. The system protected her.
Right. She was 84 years old when she said, actually, and all he was alleged to have done, he didn't even do this, but all he was alleged to have done was wolf whistled at her. Right. Or whatever, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Years old, and she's like, do you know what? Actually, like, he didn't do that, and. And then do you know what everyone else said? Oh, it's terrible, but she's an old woman now.
Yeah, that's exactly what everyone said, Shereen.
That's exactly what everyone said. So even in the obvious wrongdoing that resulted in a young Black boy's death, even despite a child's death, even despite everything that we know in modern society, she was still protected. And what's really interesting is just, you know, Nicole, you mentioned about Amy Cooper, is I forgot his first name, but he's also Cooper.
Christian Cooper. Christian,
yes, Christian.
And he said, because she's obviously going through, you know, whatever, and he said, I think she's been punished enough.
She's been punished enough.
Even he is protecting.
Right, exactly, right.
He's protecting her.
Right? And she was Canadian, by the way. I just want to know.
You know what?
In here, lady.
You know what? And it's you know, as much as I'm fed up of turning the other cheek, if I'm really honest with you. We need to turn the other cheek all the time. And it's like, I get it that, you know, Christian being a good man, but you could have been a hashtag. You could have been another hashtag. Right. That's what Christian doesn't see. I'm like, how have you missed this? You could have been another hashtag.
But that's the system that she used her race as a weapon against you, and we could have been mourning you.
But Abi, here's the thing though: the color of our skin or the shade of our skin is used as a weapon, you know, against the right. That's used as that. Yeah. But the thing is, our social conditioning means we never push against the very behavior that keeps.
Absolutely, Shereen. Yes.
So, you know what we're saying about, you know, the dam has been broken. We've reached this point now where I think there's almost like a third dynamic that's coming with this, and that's, you know, one, we're going, enough is enough in every sense of the word. We are not going to stay silent anymore. We're not going to keep. But also, the other thing is, at the same time, as people of color, as marginalized people, as whatever, we're going, do you know what? I'm not going to buy into the social conditioning that has kept me not pushing against the very things that I can see and feel, but I felt powerless to be able to do anything to make that change. And I think we're seeing now that individuals, whoever they are, with like we are, when I say like we're not people of influence, you know what I mean? We're for the world. We are not running big multinational companies, right? We are not celebrities. We are not influencers in all the ways that you know all the glory. But we are all, and many other people are trying to affect change in their ways, and it's having a ripple effect. So we're not even, what we're saying is we're not even waiting for the systems and the things around us to get themselves together. We're not sitting back here going, right, just give, somebody knock on my door when it's all fixed. We're going, do you know what? We're going to keep pushing, and we're going to keep talking, and we're going to keep challenging until some things start to change. But what we have to do is start to hold people accountable. And that's why I was disappointed with Christine, because I thought, you're not holding her accountable.
Agreed. Everything you said, Shereen.
This is, the woman who got Emmett Till, she was not held accountable. Why do we always want to protect white women?
Because
why is that? Do you know what I mean?
The system has embedded that into our psyche so deep that Christian didn't even realize what he was doing.
Yeah.
Christian didn't even understand what he was doing. He had the systems of historical systemic oppression are ingrained so deep that he doesn't even understand what within him, his own behaviors. So he's reacting against all that he knows, because we have never been given the opportunity to, in survival mode, we have never been given the opportunity to sit down ourselves and look at the systems within the oppression that we have ourselves. I talk about, racism, and it's so ingrained in our everyday lives that it can't be named a lot of times. Black people can't name racism in some ways because it's so ingrained and into our system. So somebody like Christian, to be able to have the foresight without doing the work to truly understand, he wasn't probably capable to be able to even know what he was doing as it was happening. And for him, he was trying to survive, because every day when we go out, like, we don't know if we're going to be killed and we're going to come home.
Right. And do you also think, this whole, this is another thing that's, and I'm not saying there's no principles within this, but this idea of being the bigger person, right?
Well, yes, Shereen. Yes.
We're taught, this thing, right? We're taught, right?
To turn the other cheek, like we're Jesus Christ's love child.
Right, and be the bigger person. So when somebody stabs you, turn around and understand why they stabbed you. And I'm not saying an eye for an eye, that's not what I mean. But what I'm saying is this whole idea, and particularly for us as Black people, because I think, because our positions are so precarious and we feel like we are one step away from getting pushed back to whatever we've tried to claw our way out of, literally or metaphorically. There's always this thing of, we push, but actually we buy into this whole idea of we need to rise above it. And to rise above it means you don't challenge and you don't push. And I was talking to somebody earlier today, and I was saying, like, I'm very literal, because I've always got to take something so too far. But I said to her, like, in my mind, even though I wasn't there, but you can imagine, I imagine it's a little bit like being in the cotton fields, right? And you're right at the back, and you do all these things, and you challenge, and you make your way to the front of the cotton field, and you can see the steps of the master's house, right in front of you. And you've done all this work to get to the front of the cotton field, because you're saying this cotton field is not for me anymore. And then you get to the front of the steps and you can see the steps, but for whatever reason, you cannot get yourself on that step in terms of what's in here, but also
exactly.
Do you know what I mean? And
that's a brilliant metaphor. I think that's a brilliant metaphor.
I mean? And I know people are a bit like, oh God, Shereen, you and your bloody slavery metaphors. And I'm like,
no, but that makes sense. And I think that's true.
It's about survival, and it's about this idea of like, this where we're living is not right. It's not conducive to anybody to live their potential and. But actually, I can't get over that line. And when I do get to that point, I go, do you know what? Maybe they didn't mean it. Or do you know what? Let me be the bigger person. Let me just step right. Do you know, I'm just like,
and so what I want to say to that, Shereen, is that, like, do not underestimate that while you are taking that step back and trying to be the bigger person, that they are not calculating their next move. Manipulate.
Why are you coming with this? Absolutely.
So there's always like, okay, well, now we got to spin the narrative, and we see this every time there's a shooting, every time there's another murder, it starts getting spun, right? And so if you react, you must be a racist too, because look at how you're behaving towards me, right? Or you're overreacting, and so there's always a spin on that narrative.
Or we blame the victim, so then we start going,
right? Always.
Jacob shouldn't have reached into the car. He walked away, and I'm like, what? So he should have been shot that 7 times. But then the other guy that kills 2 people, like the police are offering him 2 glasses.
He went home to sleep. He went home to sleep that night.
Right. He did.
But you notice there's just
home to sleep. That's right. Yeah. Absolutely.
But they spin that and spin it and spin it and spin it until everybody starts to go, well, that makes sense, doesn't it? Right? And then everybody,
But you know the phrase that's used about Black people probably the most is like, I hear what you're saying, but do you not think there's an element of you people don't help yourselves?
Right.
How many times have we heard that? Right? How many times have I heard white women say to me, Shereen, if you were a bit softer, edgy. And or listen, I'll give you a classic example. When I first started doing my videos, and I did my Freedom to Breathe interview, where basically like a not an idiot in that way, but like I was bawling like a baby, and I never do that, and then swearing because I was crying. But do you know how many white women reached out to me and said, just seeing you cry was just so, and I was like, what? Like,
so, and they can't even see the line between their white saviorism.
Right.
Their white savior, they want to come and save us.
They're not even aware of it. That's part of that's part of their white fragility. That is white fragility. That is the essence.
It was almost, it's not even almost, what they were saying is, seeing you cry made you seem more human, and therefore
that's exactly what they're saying. Right. Look at Serena Williams. Look at Serena Williams. How Serena Williams, the most champion of our champions. No one has won Grand Slams like her. Nobody has. Yeah. So look at the way they turn her into an animal. In comparison to her white counterparts who are nowhere near her in regard to her greatness. Do you know what I mean? And even with everything she has done for tennis, I read an article 3 days ago where some kind of journalist said that Naomi Osaka was going to lead the way for racial unity. And I'm just like, they've just erased all of Serena Williams' hard work.
Because they perceive her not even to be female. They don't perceive her to be a woman. They have attacked her physical, how she conducts herself at every aspect of who she is. And I'm a massive tennis fan, by the way, so I speak to this with enormous passion because I'm a huge US Open is happening right now. So the only other place I'd rather be is watching that next to being here. But they have villainized her on every aspect of her being. And including how she pointed out in matches where there was issues that were of racial bias that were happening in the matches, and one that was that happened to be with Naomi.
I remember that. Yeah, I watched that match
at the finals of the U.S. Open a couple of years ago, and so that is the typical way that Black women have been perceived, as that they don't exist, that they are not women. She has perceived as not. She's been.
Nicole, this is also the reason why Black women are more likely to die in childbirth,
right?
Because our pain is not. It goes all the way back to slave years, where doctors would operate on Black women with no anesthesia. No anesthesia. Anesthesia, in fact, no anesthesia.
I think you said the right word. I think I said it wrong.
Either way, with no pain, with no pain relief, because they thought we didn't need it, and that's why a lot of times Black women cry out during whatever it might be, and we die on the operating table. We die after childbirth because they don't believe our pain. They don't believe our pain because we are less humans, because we are more on the animal side of things, because we're less dainty than our white counterparts, these things happen to us. And that shows you, and this is what we're talking about, institutional racism. It's not just the workplace, it funnels out into even our education system, our medical system, it funnels
the
into
financial and economic system, buying homes, getting a loan.
Exactly.
like anything, getting a job, getting a promotion, anything that you can think of. I read an article the other day that talked, today actually, a very close friend sent me an article, and they talked about Black women have typically a wealth of $100. White women have wealth of $42,000. Think about the disparity of that if they looked at their bank account today, and this is in 2020. Imagine the disparity of that, and knowing that if you with $100 you can't buy groceries for a week.
Right. And then I'm just trying to find, sorry to interrupt, I'm just trying to find somebody, because like I keep, sorry, everybody knows I'm so bad with the comments, like they know it already, because I get so involved in the conversation, I forget I'm meant to be like, being a good person, right? So somebody wrote, I'm desperately trying to find it, so apologies, I think whoever, I can remember the question, I just can't remember who asked it. Somebody said in the comments here, is allyship, right? So this whole renewed, particularly, going back to this idea of like feminism and white people, is this whole idea of allyship actually helping in this context?
So, I don't even like the word allyship. Right? That's another cop out of.
No, but I think, I know. We don't, but however,
yeah, no. So what I'm saying,
yeah.
If they turn into accomplices, what I call accomplices, and they actually start doing the work, you tell me, because I don't know that just saying you're an ally does anything. What's that doing?
You can't even. I mean, the fact that you saw. It's amazing going on LinkedIn and seeing people self-appoint themselves as allies. It's just hilarious. They're out here just wearing the crown and just giving themselves the crown and saying, "Look at me, I'm an ally." And I'm like, I have seen you do nothing. I've seen you do nothing. Let me tell you something. I will give you a good example of allyship. I went for a job interview in June, and the CEO of the company asked me, he said to me, Abi, you mentioned that you had there was a lot of misogynist and racist comments in your last company. Can you give me an example? Can you prove to me what they were? And I was just very quiet, and I said, sorry, did you just ask me to prove to you what I went through in that last company? He said, yeah, because racism is, I mean, was it racism? I just wanted to double check with you. And I thought, I don't need to join this company. Absolutely not. I went back to the person who wanted to hire me. I spoke to her. We're friends. We're friends, but I was able to trust her enough to be honest. 2 weeks later, she handed in her notice. And I sent her a message and I said, oh, why did you hand your notice? She goes, do you know what? There was a lot of things coming, but the question he asked you about you to prove the racism that you went through was the straw that broke the camel's back. And I didn't say this to her on the phone because, it was a bit awkward. But I said this to my friend. I said, that is what we call an ally. The fact that she was like, do you know what? I don't need this. I don't need this. And the way you have made a Black person feel off the back of you making your statement saying that we stand with the Black community, but look how you made a Black candidate feel, asking them to prove the gauntlets that they've had to walk through. I don't need to be here. This isn't a company that represents my values, and this isn't a company that uplifts my integrity. And I was so shocked. And she said it was, many things had happened. It wasn't just what happened with me, but it was the straw that broke the camel's back. And I just remember thinking, you don't have to be there, waving your allyship banner on LinkedIn for the whole world to, because a lot of people they really want to be patted on the back. A lot of white people really want to look at me, look at what I'm doing, look at the things that I'm doing, but actually you're not doing anything. You're not doing anything.
No, and I think what I wanted to say, the other thing about allyship is, because for me, when I do, I have reclaimed and I put active in front of it. So I talk about active.
I like that. Yes,
right?
Yes.
Like do something, right?
Yes.
do something, right? Then we can talk. But the other thing is that I say with that is that you are not ready, like anybody, if you just take anybody out, until you are willing to sacrifice something.
Yes.
Now, it doesn't have to be in the literal, dramatic sense of, oh my God, you got hands in your notice. But
yes, exactly.
To sacrifice something, because to be a true ally is not comfortable, because
exactly.
You have to put your head above the parapet and say, this is not cool. I think the challenge where we are now in the world is because social media and technology is such is that people think words equals allyship. And what I say is, that's great if to engage in a version of a conversation, elevate that and are you having conversations like this? Elevate that and go, are you having conversations like this in a public arena when you know there may be blowback against what you're talking about? So therefore, are you sacrificing your social capital to be seen in educating?
Yes, Shereen. Yes, Shereen.
So we talk about, you know, in order to be an ally, you have to leverage your privilege to close an inequity gap, right?
Yes.
So people, one of the issues is that people need to be taught what their privilege is. And that's where we're focused, is on people's behaviors.
Yeah.
Because in some cases, and I would say in a large percent of the cases, people have not looked at their privilege.
Nice.
And so people have not, if you haven't looked at your privilege, you can't, how can you leverage that to close an equity gap for somebody else? You don't even understand. So part of the problem is, everybody's got this baseline of diversity and inclusion as a mandate, but they don't understand their own lived experience. If you don't understand your own lived experience, how do you understand mine? And if you don't understand mine, you can't advocate for me. If you cannot, and so we need to roll back and say, let's start to look, you know, anti-Black racism 101, white privilege and white fragility 101, understanding privilege and marginalization and the effects of both one versus the other is going to help you look at your own self-identity, and to look at the structures within yourself and how you operate is going to be the way that you learn to understand what is your privilege. And then when you understand that and you've gone through the discomfort and you're ready to walk through that discomfort, you can start to begin to say, how can I leverage that privilege that I've been given? Firstly, just by having white skin.
Right.
That has nothing to do with whether you have challenges. That has nothing to do with, you know, whether you have means or you don't have means. That has to do by virtue of just how you look.
Right.
Period.
Just because of where society is
placed, you exactly
control over, but know that you're there. And I think the other thing, Nicole, is I always say to people as well is like, and I guess this is where I probably slightly differ from the mainstream in this, is like, look, my thing is there's a place for talking about privilege, white privilege, right? There's a place for that, but there's also a place for talking about all of our privileges. And if you substitute the word privilege for power, it can stop people from feeling powerless, because we all have some power.
And one of the things that I think that our work that we do in our work is for you have to examine all of your privileges, because all of us have some privilege and all of us have some marginalized.
Exactly.
And so you have to sit back and reflect on that and do the work to look at where are the areas that you're privileged. I'm very privileged in the fact that my father was a very well-known academic. I grew up in a very, well-to-do household. I was educated. I lived in a nice home. I had, clothes on my back. I had all food, fresh, healthy food. I had an amazing education. I had a college education where I was able to get multiple college degrees. Yet I'm marginalized in the essence of who I am as a Black woman. I'm marginalized as a mixed race woman. I was never allowed to declare that I'm mixed race. I always had to be defined by the overarching fact that I am a Black woman, not that I have two heritages that make up my DNA. So I think all of us need to start to reflect on the areas where we have privilege and then the areas where we're marginalized. And when you start to look at your own identity, you can start to understand, what do I have within myself that I can use? Leverage is another word, but we can simplify it by saying these are the things that I can do. These are the opportunities that I've been afforded. And how do I now pay that forward? And understanding what my own opportunities are can then help me look beside me, in front of me, and behind me to figure out, how do I help somebody else? But until you understand that, you can't help anybody. Other than using your words and posting on social media,
that's what
things, right? And that's why you're seeing so much of that, right? And so we see.
No, say the same thing I was saying. When you were saying about social media, I'm like, and that's why we get so frustrated with what I call only the words of support, because what you've just explains, Nicole, is so much bigger than that. Therefore, you have so much more power. Therefore, you can make so much more impact, and we can all do to different degrees in different ways.
Right.
But then when people say to me, after all this time, after all of this time that's gone on and all the things that happened, like, I really don't know what I can do to make a difference. I don't know what to do. And I'm like, that's a cop-out now. That is a cop-out, because if you've done the work, to your point, all the things that you talked about in terms of the identity, and look at what you have around you and where you are,
Absolutely.
you will be able to recognize where you can make a difference in your sphere of influence. It's not about whether everybody knows about it. It doesn't matter about that, but you will recognize, if you are still asking the question, what can I do? You haven't done enough work.
Right.
I'm not being judged. I'm not.
No, the end. That's a mic drop. That's it. The end. If you're still having to ask the question, we're not doing the end.
We want to let people know, outside of having powerful conversations like these, and I'm hoping we're going to have many more with this group here, is that there are the internet, which most of us have access to. There are so many resources available to everybody. So you need to take some responsibility to learn and to educate yourself, so that you can forget about helping others, so you can better understand yourself first. Because, it's that old adage, if you don't help yourself first, you can't help anybody else, right?
Correct.
We're always running up against and Shereen and I have talked about this, about caring. Like, how do we get these people to care, right?
Yeah, so that's what I say. Everyone can come on the ship. Right? I always feel like I need to change this metaphor for the ship, because then people are like, is that another slavery analogy or metaphor? I'm like, no, it's not. I just like water. Do you know what I mean? I don't know what it is, so I just use the ship, right? But anybody can come into the ring in the nicest way possible and support and be allies and do that, providing that you care. What we don't need is people who just want to look good, or who are worried about looking bad, so they think, let me just do this, which is almost as dangerous. We don't really talk about that either. Almost as dangerous. And when you think about white women, and you think about white women who claim to be all pro-women, like come on, sister, and they call you sister, and you get all this, but they're never same people who have comments about how we wear our hair, about the fact that they feel like our physiques are too round, too athletic, I have people go, I wish, one thing I'm really envious of, like, the Black woman's body, because you put on muscle really quickly. Okay, right, like I do.
But how is that?
But then it's the flip into, oh, I know I can never look like that because my husband would never find that attractive. Microaggression. So I've got a thousand examples. It is so fun. Or I wish I could wear my hair in that way, but I know if I did, I would never be able to get hired. I would never get this job in this.
So that's reminding us. But they're reminding us. Imagine, they are reminding us of just please know your place, because
Abi,
I wish I could do
yes. Say it again.
They are reminding us of our place. That's what they're doing by saying things like that. You know what you're doing. Don't feign ignorance. Do not feign ignorance. You know what you're doing, and you know how detrimental that is to say to someone. To remind us that, oh, I wish I could wear my hair like that, but I wouldn't be employable. You know what you're saying. You know what you're saying by saying something.
I'm just going to ask you this question, and I'm trying not to infer my thoughts. But what is your view of Black women providing safe spaces for white women to explore anti-racism, white privilege, white fragility, and provide safety for them to work on understanding their privilege and what is your view on that? Because there's a lot of that still going on. If I trip over one more goddamn workshop, literally, if somebody's that face, I'm giving away my thoughts now, I'm sorry. And I'm sure that I'm genuinely, because you might change my mind and I might stop being so critical of that. But I'm kind of like, is that not protecting them in a different format, or is that just me?
I have two schools of thought. I'll start. So 2 schools of thought. One school of thought is exactly how you feel, Shereen. It is not our responsibility to educate them. On the other side, if we don't stand up and use our voice and lens, then nobody's going to learn and understand the depths of the issues as Black women that we have to deal with on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So
I agree, Nicole.
So you're telling me not to be so critical, Nicole. You're telling me to wind my neck in.
I think that, like part of as beautiful, successful, trailblazing Black and white women, all in this group today, we have a responsibility to control the narrative. One of the things that is missing in data, in papers, in workshops, in every aspect of the understanding of experience is the voices and lenses coming from Black women. Right. So if we don't take control of the narrative and the conversations, and that means having to be somewhat sensitive in doing so to be able to truly be thoughtful and kind in educating people on what that experience is, then we are losing out, because
I agree. I agree.
Understand our experience to be in control. I don't want anybody to tell somebody about my experience. I want to have the power. Yeah. I've been silenced my entire life. I want to now have the power to use my voice to educate people. And Margie said, and I'll stop in a second, Margie asked a question about how do we get people to care? Part of getting people to care is by me being strong enough, courageous enough, brave enough to share my experience in such a way that it touches your heart. And that is how you're going to get me to care. Because if you're listening to something that I'm sharing and I'm giving you my true experience, and if you're there to learn and you listen to my experience, it's going to hit you in a way that says, oh my God, I've never even thought of this. How did I contribute? How did I participate in your pain, in your struggle, in your suffering?
I agree with that. I agree with what Nicole said there. I did one last week I did a workshop with all white people.
Okay.
All white people, and to be honest, because you know me, I always I'm being attacked by flies. That's why you see me.
I know. I had to.
I'm just being attacked. They're so violent. So I did one last week, and to be honest, because sometimes I do go in a little bit aggy, and I'm just like, oh, here we go. But for me, kindness is key, and I'm not going to go into those workshops judgmentally, because I don't care. Yes, I care, but I do not care about what you have done before. My thing is, what are you going to do going forward? Because now you know better, I expect you to do better. And if I'm really honest with you, in some of those workshops that I've done, I have kickstarted off, once I've done my safe space, bit and set the tone, I have kickstarted off by saying, this is not about you.
Yeah.
This is not about how you are feeling. You need to think about how other people are. I have done that. I've gone in going, absolutely a safe space. Absolutely, this is about a journey. But I need you to decenter yourself from the narrative. Decenter yourself from the narrative. And it's very important, because I have had the conversations with all white people about racism. But we go from talking about the power of language, because a lot of white people, I'll be very honest, actually, not just a lot of white people, a lot of people don't even know the difference between race and ethnicity. They don't even know what the difference is between those two things, much less everything else. You know what I mean? Even before I get under the belly of the beast, let's just scratch the surface. Let's understand why we're doing this before we start doing a deep dive. But I have had those conversations with all white people where I'm like, why have you? One particular one. This person had the Kleenex out, and I asked, I said, why do you have your tissue out? We haven't started. Why do you
put that tissue away, because we have
confused. I was like, what's going on? We haven't. All I said was hello, Abi Adamson. But I had to off the.
Yeah, but you know what? That was her signal, though. That was her signal. What that signal said. Go tread.
That was part of the white privilege, right? Fragility. Let me know right at the beginning. Right.
Exactly. That was her signal to say, please take it easy on us, Abby. And I was like, I told her, I was like, sorry, you didn't book me for me to take it easy on you. You know what I mean? There's a reason why I'm doing this. So I had them, of course, it's a psychologically safe space, absolutely. But I needed her to know, this
No, we're not playing that game. We're not playing that game anymore. We're not doing that.
This little white flag, this literally a white flag that you're waving in the air is not going to. It's not going to.
I think you barely started.
No, this is because I feel like I have to start these conversations with people sometimes and explain the difference between harm and hurt.
Yeah.
Okay? We understand that your feelings are probably going to get hurt, and that's a personal issue. And you need to
exactly
figure out, right? But you're harming people by your behaviors and your actions and perpetuating. There is
but your ignorance, and I think that's the bit that people forget. Like right now, ignorance is killing people.
Yeah, literally, but also
this behavior because it's people tripping into things and not knowing. And what we're saying is, you need to know. 2020, there should not be ignorance. It should not be a thing and that's what's doing a lot of harm, but that's also what's slowing down the progress because some people are genuinely holding on to this idea of the way I see the world is right. And rather than be wrong and have to go through the process and the painful process of unlearning some things that you thought was the case, but that's actually not the case. All you want to do is pick and choose the things that sit right with you, because you hear this a lot, right? Well, this didn't sit right with me, and I'm still working through it, and I'm still, and I'm talking to organizations, and I'm talking to CEOs, and I'm talking to chief people officers, and do you know what I tell you? Like, if my hair wasn't red, it would be grey with the stress and the bullshit of what I hear. You know what I mean? And I'm just like, and I say that with love, like, because it's not because, that's my job, because my job is to help them see, but like, they're playing something back to me and I'm going, you don't understand what you're saying.
Right.
And some of the, and I know this is like a really, some people go, I can't believe you use this, but I use the example of rape victims, right? And what I say to them is, are you telling me that you would ask a rape victim to parade himself or herself in front of your whole organization to live their ordeal again? Repeatedly, just so everybody can understand the harm that rape does? You would never do that. So why do you keep expecting Black people to do that and then you not do the work afterwards to acknowledge and respect the bravery and the courage that it comes from doing what we're doing? And there are people who are doing this within their organizations who don't have the privilege and the freedom that we do to be able to do this here. And they're putting their jobs on the line and their mental wealth on the line by doing this. And those organizations are going, well, you know what, that's great that you've done that, but that's great, but back to business, back to normal. So they're not recognizing it. And again, it's because the trauma that our lived experience has and what it feels is still not seen as on par with anything else. It's just seen as something you Black people are talking about, still talking about it. I know it's bad that this guy got shot 7 times, but you do know we are living with COVID-19. You do know we are living with high unemployment. You do know we are living, and I'm just like, are you serious?
Well, and Shereen, they're also teaching it to their children and others. Otherwise, you wouldn't have seen that 17-year-old white vigilante walking with a gun and nobody stopping him, right? So
true, Margie.
That conversation still, and you guys, what you couldn't see off screen is these are the conversations I have, and I have sons, right? And I have a daughter, but I have sons, and I have these conversations. So I'm always like, hey, if your room's a total disaster, that upsets me, but I'm going to let that go. If your hair is long, but here's the conversations that I want you to remember long after I'm gone. And here's what I expect from you, like a male child, long after I'm gone. So the 13-year-old came in and he opened the door and he heard us talking and he went like this and just walked back.
Oh, you mean like how my partner opened the door and as soon as he heard me talk about white privilege, he was like, oh shit, she's coming for my people again. Let me go back.
It's funny because nothing we want to talk about. He's like, I'm going to be stuck here with these women for the next hour explaining why I got to carry this on after my mother's dead, right? So like but you know what? We have to have these conversations with them because he's going to be the one that's going to be in charge of people someday. He's going to
it's funny that Shereen to say that. He said he's coming for my people again. So my mum was like, as everyone knows, my mum's trying to get me married off because I'm single, and my mum's just literally Any man, literally. I was like, Mum, I'm straight. I think she wanted to introduce me to a woman. I was like, Mum, I'm straight. She's like, look, anything. I'm not anything. But it's really funny that you should mention that about a race, because one of my friends said to me, you know, when you go on dates and you're meeting guys and I really don't care, black, white, I don't care. So she's like, do you bring up the conversation of, because obviously racial equality and equality is so important to you, do you bring that up in your dating life? I'm like, well, absolutely, because it's such a big part of me. And if I'm going to date, you know, my ex-boyfriend's white, if I'm going to date a white man, then I need to understand that we are sync. You know what I mean? Because I can't be fighting for this, you know, he can't be anti-black, basically. Yeah. And that does happen. You know, people think because if you're in an interracial relationship or you're married to someone who's...
Oh, Abby, don't start this when we've been going for an hour. No. We will do a session on this. You will come with something.
No, it's just because you did it, not me. It's because you said she's coming for my people again. That's what triggered me, because people think that we can have these discussions, you know, yes, as women of color or as a white woman, you can have these discussions and be in an interracial relationship. It is possible,
and it doesn't. But also, it doesn't. Because I'll let everybody have their little 2 minutes, because we have been going for over an hour before people it's time, because it's gone so quickly, right? It always does. But one of the things that I also say as well, and I'm like, people know me well enough, I hope by this now, but to engage in this sort of conversation when you're a black person, a white person, whatever, and still have that layer of honesty is what is needed. And the way to do this, back to Abby's point, is like, to some extent, like, center yourself, but also know when to decenter yourself. Right. So in the same way, we were talking about, you know, some of the things that we've heard from white women or whatever else it is. Margie wasn't sat here waving her white flag and her clean woman, Abby. Do you know what I mean? You're a woman who don't know better. Yeah, shut up. Put it down, love. Put it down. Go and get a cup of tea and come back. That's so funny.
Honestly.
No, I mean, and then maybe, like, we might be in a room, like, because I do spend my life, and the reality is, and it's probably the same thing for you, Nicole and Abby and Margie, the reality is, the work that we're doing, we're talking to predominantly white people. Exactly. Right? Even with me, I'm talking to 30, 40, 200, 400, 500 people, trying to helping them understand about racism and what it means to be anti-racism. And I'm talking to them about my lived experience. And I'm the only black person in the space. So I have to learn how to be able to still engage with kindness and honesty and challenge, and still participate in that, even though I'm the only one. You know, you're not always going to be able to have the conversation around the safety of people who look like you. Right. That's not the world. And I think that's really important for people to mean they can lean into these conversations more without thinking like, oh my God, like, you know, I don't want to do this because it's like 3 black women, or I don't want to do this because it's 3 white men. It's like, no, like, we need to have this conversation, and part of that is maybe learning how to do that and how to listen and how to be honest, but still you can do that without attacking people, you know. Exactly. That's me shut up now. I like you 3 and then we'll close off.
This has been fantastic, you know. It was well needed, and I think this does. I hope this gives, because, you know, me in my head, and again, one of the reasons. And first of all, I was so happy to hear. I was a bit nervous because I thought, should I tell them all that I didn't really think about feminism, and I wasn't really you know, marching down the street with tampons in the air type of thing, because that's what a lot of people think feminism is. You know what I mean? You come walking out and you got your bra, swinging your bra around, walking down the street. That's not what it's about. Do you know what I mean? But it's actually, for me, it's such an eye opener, and I hope it gives people food for thought to stop that erasure, you know, to stop the erasure of you know, of the lived experiences of people of color. You know, feminism wasn't just made for white women,
right? No.
And I think that's really, for me, that's really important for, you know. I think that's been a really good point of discussion. I think people need to know that.
I think we need to have more of these discussions. I think for people to actually physically see us and see that we and to see how cohesive we all are on the beliefs, is really vital too. Like all of us basically stood up and said, all four of us stood up and said, we don't see ourselves as feminists. If that is how we see and feel, imagine how many other people that are out there that have not actually had the courage or the strength. So I thank all of us, and I celebrate all of us for being courageous and brave to lean in and be able to have this conversation and provide opportunities for others to have the same conversation. And I think we should continue it. We should not stop here.
I feel so humbled. I always just feel so humbled to share such a space with such extraordinary women. I always just feel like, knowing me, I'm gonna go like,
I know.
I just always feel just so humbled, and it just always fills me with such joy. And I just
hope is my thing.
Tons of hope. I hope we can. And I say we do this again, ladies. I think that we haven't even touched the surface on so many topics in this area. And like I had my phone going, I see some of the comments of people wanting to more, please. This is just
I know so many questions. I'm like, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. But the good thing is, we'll be back.
We will be back. Thank you, Margie. Thank you so much, Margie.
Thank you.
Together.
Thank you for having us. I feel so humbled as well to be in such esteemed company. So thank you so much. I can't wait to do this again.
No, I appreciate it. And you guys know my backstory for this, which you guys are much more polite than I am, because I just kind of put stuff out there and people don't like it. But you know my backstory. And so, yes, I don't want to wait another 25 years. That would be really great if we could do this in the next few
Let's do it.
or whatever. But yes, we have to have these conversations, and we have to hear people's experiences. And I think, the visual alone, like you said, of the four of us being able to have this conversation, and we all, think and feel the same way, that's very powerful. And, hopefully it encourages other people to start speaking up, and pick up other people's voices and stop silencing.
Yeah.
I feel like really, it just hit the ceiling the last 6 months of silencing people more than they've ever been silenced before, and just enough already, right? So, appreciate everybody that hopped on, because I know everybody's working hard, and this is my lunch hour. I know it's your dinner time, and I'm grateful.
I'm very humbled and appreciative, and this is it's been lovely as always. And I will download it and I'll put it on YouTube. So I'll put it on YouTube so people can see. Yeah, no,
Excellent.
Oh, I did it! Yeah! Upside down, I'm having my hands. Oh, fabulous. All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much for those who've as always. I hope you can hopefully they just interact with everybody else, because I'm so rubbish. I'm doing my best. I'm fine. I'm so good. So sorry. I'll do better. But we will be back on doing those. And also just to remind everybody, because I don't do conversations by half, I'm talking to the Jewish Leadership Council on Monday.
Lovely.
Yeah, the two CEOs from the Jewish Leadership Council here in the UK. So that is, listen, oh God, racism, anti-Semitism, way forward, the whole thing. So we're going to be no hold barred. So two fabulous people, Claudia and Michelle, I'll be talking to. So yeah, I'll be back again.
We're back tomorrow.
We're back tomorrow. Oh my God, yes. Me, Abby and Leanne, we're back at 2:00 tomorrow, summertime. Yes, there will be music, even with our tears and our grief over Chadwick Boseman, but we're gonna be bringing it. We're gonna be talking about representation and album music. I'll be doing on DJ duties.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.